this morning when the market opened, I mean, well, let's set the stage. Friday was a lot of very bearish flow, some of the most bearish flow we've seen certainly in the last month. But I will go back to April to see big call selling in Nvidia, big call selling in Tesla. There was a giant VIX call position that was bought, October 20 strike calls. Huge size there. So there was a lot of hedging flow, a lot of very bearish flow on that Friday. And this was all triggered by the BABA report in the morning, I think. That kind of dented NVIDIA's story a little bit, the fact that BABA was coming up with some of these new chips. You fast forward to today, there was a big October put cover this morning, and that really helped the market to bounce, kind of zap some of the downside momentum. And we just seen a complete lack of bear follow through today here on Tuesday. So, do you tie a lot of this to end of month, kind of what happened late last week? On one hand, you can say yes. The kind of bear case to this would be, hey, look, fixed strike vol is actually higher than we were late last week, suggesting that there is some hedging coming in still. People are a little bit more worried about some of the economic data coming up. A lot of jobs data. This is like jobs week. We have PMI this week, non-farm payroll, JOLTS, jobless claims. So vols are elevated for those short-dated data prints, suggesting that there's indeed some concerns. But all that being said, the market had the chance to really slam this thing lower, and they really didn't.
Yeah, not much, right? Like I said, I'm looking at it right now. Noon basically was the low of the day. What else should I be looking at here, Brent?
It looks like that low of the day was. Pardon me, Oliver. Apologies.
Yeah, go ahead.
The bottom of the day there was 635 in spiders. We bounced right off that level. You can see there's a big condor trade. You can see the kind of ghost wicks of that candle there on the left, right there. So huge 0DT condor. We've been seeing those come in on a daily basis. Now the upside, you got to start watching that one. That's kind of stretched to that upside there, but there's a big position directly above your cursor there. I think around 64.25, right?
Okay.
So those are these 0DT positions that come in. And what's funny about this is that I mentioned the put cover this morning. That put cover was October puts. And then around noon off that SPY 635 level, we saw 0DT calls come flooding in. And so these 0DT positions oftentimes act as a stabilizer, whether it's traders hedging gamma or taking cheap, buy the dip, opportunities with cheap 0DT options. You see those flows come in, and oftentimes they can kind of act again as a stabilizer. Now, Oliver, if you toggle the 0DTE button, just toggle that back and forth, and you see how little the map changes, right?
Okay.
What that's telling me is
a lot. It's coming from zeros.
Yeah, there's not a lot of non-zero DT positions out there right now. I think that one big position that was there was these October positions. These VIX calls are still hanging around, but again, the thing that catches my eye today is that we kind of shift back to data dependency. The bottom line on this is if we hold 6,400, bulls can regain the baton, so to speak. And even if these rolling data points that are coming up, if they prove to not be too terribly material, then we should still, rally here into September. Ugly data points, and if we get back under 6,400, then we have to worry about this jump in vol. We have to worry about Vanna as a negative flow for markets. We have to worry about negative gamma to the downside, and
vortex potential if we get stuck under here.
Yeah, and it's clear we need a data point, right? The flows in and of themselves are not going to shake people out. Like, we need bad data to force the downside, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes people are just in that kind of bearish move, right? And the flows just are too large to sort of fight off. So at the moment, market's shaking off some of this BABA news. You could tag some of the selling as month end, and vol just got a little too cheap, but it's really being digested pretty well.
Brent, what role do you see NVIDIA and the semis playing in this right now? There is a pretty decent sell-off going on in the big tech stuff right now. NVIDIA's got 2.6 million options traded right now. Tesla's at 1.1. Obviously, Q's a ton at 4 mil, and it seems like that's where the weakness is. So after last week, it kind of makes me a little worried about some of this AI stuff, like it ran out of some gas since NVIDIA earnings.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing is into month end, NVIDIA had the largest weighting of a single stock in the S&P 500 ever, right? And so you were coming from this valuation that was just unbelievably stretched, priced for perfection. And so the earnings were they seemed like the earnings were going to skate by as not a big deal. And then a minute later, BABA News comes out and says, hey, we're going to create some chips. And that kind of added to that downside. The thing that's interesting to me, not as a fundamental guy, but if you remember at the end of January, we had the DeepSeek news came out, and Nvidia, from a very similar price point and sort of stance as the leader of the market, just lost 14, 15%, right? It just got
Hmm.
decimated. And, all else equal, it seemed to hold and digest some of this news pretty well. As you point out there, huge volume. So I think the idea of Nvidia trading sort of sideways, but not fully capitulating, people rotating into some other stocks is a viable one, particularly if people kind of aggressively go back into small caps, which on a volume of 1.1 on the IWMs is pretty big, right?
Okay.
So there is that chance of rotation. Tesla had
Okay.
bad car sales, that's getting decked, but I also want to highlight that volume of
IWM's
VIX.
usually not up there that high.
Not usually that big, over 1.1 with still another half hour
Okay,
left.
that's
And VIX
interesting.
volume of near a million is big, especially for a non-expiration day. So
Okay.
I think there was clearly some monetization of this VIX move over 18 towards 20 today as well. So the market, even though it was weaker, people seem to be taking advantage of that dip, selling options, selling VIX, spikes. Vol has kind of normalized, and if the data is no big deal this week, then I think we can kind of just put our rally caps back on, and this was just sort of a little dust up.
All right. I'm looking at the scanner here, which I like, this quadrant of high IV rank versus risk reversal rank, high IV being
Yeah.
going up to down. A lot of this stuff still in this bottom left quadrant, cheap volatility, upside potential. We did talk about how the calls for the overall market were pretty cheap last week. I mean, is that why? Because we faded here? Are they getting even cheaper? Or I guess not, because vol's picking up a little bit?
There's been a ton of call selling. So call selling was the way to express Nvidia was kind of overbought, or Tesla was overbought, or Apple was overbought, and that suppresses call implied vols, obviously, right? That's much different from buying puts, because as puts, if you buy puts and the market goes down, hedging flows, will push the stock faster, vol should spike, right? So in this case, it's more like people have seen or playing for a cap in Nvidia prices, as opposed to the expression that the stock is going to drop sharply, right? And that's kind of the big distinction there. The
Okay.
QQQ calls right now, you can make the case that they're very cheap, right? Because the other thing to note here is, even though we're moving down, those implied vol ranks on your screen are quite low, right? And those are Friday's closing implied vols. So even though there was this big selling, you're not seeing the vol spike in a material way, which is a sign that people aren't playing for a whole ton of downside. One thing I do want to point out while we're on this
Hmm.
screen is gold is ripping. It's
Yeah.
around, the GLD ETFs are around 325 right now. Those calls are pricing as getting expensive. If GLD moves to sort of that middle of that chart, then I'm going to be seeing gold as overbought, right? Just from an options perspective. When you
Okay.
see high implied vol rank with expensive calls, that's oftentimes a short-term topping signal. So if you're long gold, I think that's what you want to watch for. Is that stock up, vol up really forming? And gold could kind of be starting to sniff that as we
Mm.
update the data into tomorrow. But that is certainly the standout winner to the upside.
Seriously, gold, man. Just a beast. Absolutely. 36 right now, even after a couple little hits from the high of the day, just a beast of a day. Also, kind of interesting, too, that gold's rallying while the dollar is having a firm day. The macro stuff is so messy right now. But I got a guy that's going to try and help us figure that out up next. Brent, thanks a lot. Nice. Glad we got you. Appreciate